Okay, I'm going to talk about these elongated pharaoh skulls. I've seen them all in the some of the skeletal remains, the statues. They're all elongated. Now they don't exactly slope up like some of those Peruvian skulls. They slope back, although some of their headgear seems to indicate going up. But this is not normal. It reminds me of some of the Phrygian caps as well, but it's not just one pharaoh or two pharaohs. It's all of them that I've seen. There is something different about this family. A normal human skull does not look like that. Their skull looks more Neanderthal, if anything. And like I said, artificial cranial deformation looks more like the headgear than the actual skull of these pharaohs. And there are some congenital issues that could cause that, but I can't see that for every um, pharaoh that I can find on the internet. Now, what I found interesting is the Hollywood archetype that matches the pharaoh. Okay, now Aleister Crowley had this little character called Lamb, and it was a demon he talked to, or his wife talked to in Egypt. It reminds me of the Wizard of Oz, and it's the same archetype you see on the cone heads, the movie Prometheus, Ming the Merciless, the Borg Queen, Lady Gaga, the same character archetype in the Fantastic Planet. This Earth Final Conflict, they were androgynous. Star Trek had these androgynous type characters as well as a larger androgynous giant character. Twilight Zone had a character, same thing. It was a cannibal. Egghead, same kind of concept. Planet of the Apes, they destroyed the world before and the apes took over, but they had psychic ability and they lived underground. That's another movie called Signs. This was from the Martian Chronicles, and they're both hairless, Martians, a male and a female, androgynous, and their eyes glowed. Okay, that's another movie. This is Paul, and then the characters in Hellboy, and when he dies, he's human, almost like a Christ figure. And that's from Stargate. That's what the character was who took over the human body. Mel Gibson's Satan is androgynous and hairless. And then in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, you have this smaller and larger androgynous type characters. Now, some are more human like, some are more these gray alien. Now, does Hollywood know something we don't know? Maybe, maybe not. They tend to keep using the same archetype character that matches the pharaoh, who's was hairless and had these elongated, sloping heads that went back like a Neanderthal, different than a modified skull. It's not the same shape. The modified skulls of Peru are up; they're more like a cone head. These skulls of these pharaohs are more Neanderthal but bigger and longer. Now, the thing about Hollywood that you have to remember is that they take a lot of ideas from people without permission and they look at things that are out there. And many of these people in the Hollywood and music industry have been sued for a lot of copyright and trademark infringements and just downright stealing stuff. But the proof is in the proof of what I'm saying was at an exhibit at the Milwaukee Art Museum. And I'm going to pull up some pictures here. Now, the name of this exhibit was about, it was an animation exhibit. It was the animation Art Goes to the Movies. And basically, what it was showing was how people in Hollywood, behind the scenes, basically go out and look at famous paintings and sculptures and architecture. And they use those artifacts to create characters and backdrops for their animation. And they basically showed you the piece of art that they used to create what they did in their movies. So even some of it was like, from an ancient rock art, Wally, they took, or, Greek pottery. They were using some of that for Kung Fu Panda. So when you start looking at these movies and these animations and music videos, and you start to see things, not only just Kabbalah and Qliphoth and religion and their gematria encoded, there's they definitely are deliberately doing that, and they're definitely deliberately using very famous pieces of art or architecture, and they're copying from it. So I have to wonder if, knowing what these pharaohs look like and their headgear, if they're just, and knowing that they were the rulers of the human, race, if they're just copying that archetype for their movies. But, is there anything more to it? And that's something I'm trying to dig out of the text. And I told you in the Nag Hammadi library that there was a passage in here, after I already showed you that the chief archon was Cronus, but that these angels of his wanted to mate with the regular, human women, but they were unsuccessful at first, and they had to change their likeness to the likeness of the human woman in order to mate. And so, other than that, I don't really know what's going on as to what their real image is. And basically, let me just reread this from the Apocryphon of John out of this Nag Hammadi library. It says, quote, "And he made a plan with his powers. He sent his angels to the daughters of men, that they might take some of them for themselves and raise offspring for their enjoyment. And at first, they did not succeed. When they had no success, they gathered together and they made a plan together. They created a counterfeit spirit who resembles the spirit who had descended, so as to pollute the souls through it. And the angels changed themselves in their likeness into the likeness of their," and then in parentheses, "the daughters of men," and parentheses, "mates, filling them with the spirit of darkness which they had mixed for them, and with evil. They brought gold and silver and a gift, and copper and iron and metal of all kinds of things, and they steered the people who had followed them into great troubles by leading them astray with many deceptions. They, the people, became old without having enjoyment. They died, not having found truth, and without knowing the God of truth. And thus the whole creation became enslaved forever from the foundation of the world until now. And they took women and begot children out of the darkness according to the likeness of their spirit. And they closed their hearts, and they hardened themselves through their hardness of the counterfeit spirit until now." Okay, I'm going to stop. That's end quote. And I did the previous video on this Nag Hammadi and the archons, and the Christ was supposed to come from a primeval father, and this demiurge was cast down into Tartarus, and his son Sabaoth brought up to the seventh heaven with Sophia and Zoe, who taught him everything and gave him power. That's Zeus. The question I am still trying to figure out is, in this Nag Hammadi, who is the primeval father that Christ came from? And I'm not sure if the primeval father was Sabaoth, or if it was a previous god. I'm just thinking more one of these gods that was murdered like 4 generations before Cronus. But that's one indication that something was different about them than the average human. And I've in previous videos talked about the book of Enoch that stated that that these angels and watchers were giant, and they were white, and they were frightening. Um, I did see something a long time ago in the Dead Sea Scrolls discussing the father of Moses having a dream, and two of these angels were arguing over him, and one was described as having the face of a viper. I'm going to try and look that passage up. If I find it, I'll just post it on Facebook or something, or maybe just write a little blurb on here. Um, but I'm basically, trying to get some good descriptions of what these characters look like, these archons, chronides, and everything I've read so far has shown me that they were giant, that they were Caucasoid, and they had hair. They were described as having hair. But then there's some of these esoteric other, writings that describe them as frightening and beast-like to the average human. So I have to wonder, what they really look like. And on top of it, they were created as well. Now, this mother goddess, Tiamat and Abzu, I have to really go back into the Sumerian writings to see if they procreated sexually or if it was described as just creating. Because if you get into the Sumerian writings, they have to get this goddess to create humans. Oh, I just found the passage in the Dead Sea Scrolls. It says, Amram's vision expresses the strong dualism of light and darkness that is central to many of the Qumran documents, particularly the idea that a good angel of light and an evil angel of darkness contend for control of human destiny. Okay, it says, quote, in my vision, the vision of the dream, and there were two figures arguing over me and saying, and then it's missing some words, and holding a great dispute over me. So I asked them, how is it that you have authority over me? They said, we rule and have authority over all the human race. And they said to me, which one of us? And I lifted my eyes and saw one of them, whose appearance was dreadfully frightening. His clothing was multicolored and very dark. And I saw another, and he was pleasant in his appearance, and his face was laughing, and he was covered in white. And then it's blank, and then it's continues on a little bit. It just says, blank rules over you, blank. Who is this one? He said to me, now this one, his name is Malki Risha, ruler of wickedness. And I said, my lord, what is the nature of blank blank? All his deeds in darkness, and he dwells in darkness, blank. He sees and rules over all darkness, while I am Melchizedek. From the height of the depths, I am the ruler over all light. Okay, so he describes the evil one as frightening and just terrifying. So dreadfully frightening. But I have yet to find something that's just a definitive description other than being Caucasoid and giant and very strong. And some, like I said, were described as having hair. And yet, some of them are just terrifying to be looked upon. Now, the other thing I noticed in the ancient writing is that these ancient gods and goddesses or watchers and all that were telepathic and psychic and able to affect a person's mind. That's consistent in everything from mythology to these esoteric writings of Abrahamic religion. So I don't know if, from what I can tell, these pharaohs, some of them had hair, blonde, auburn, red. Those mummies, Ramsey, and those from the others from the Armada period, they had hair. And it was the Nubian pharaohs were black, but none of the rest of them were. And that's just the way it is. I mean, people can get upset, but the mummies are out there. But the main point is those mummies have something very different about their skull. some of them are unusually tall, but when you go back into some of the artworks, those pharaohs are shown as very tall, just like those Sumerian cylinder seals show their gods as very tall compared to the average human. This was a different um, human, and I don't know where they came from. I don't know if there was some kind of a androgynous race that created them, which was this goddess and her consort, or if that's just some psyop created to cover up that this was just a different race of humans on the planet, and they were taller and bigger, and they traveled, and they were smarter, and they had some kind of technology and understanding of metals, and they ruled over all the rest of humanity, and they became these pharaohs, queens, kings, and the ruler elites of today, and their priests hold the secrets. But there's definitely something different. Their skulls were different, their size was different, the facial features were slightly different, and the average human was afraid of them, and they ruled. So, as I continue to dig into these ancient writings, if I come across something definitive, I will put that out there. But for now, I'm just, showing that there is physical evidence that these pharaohs were physically different. It's in the writings. They were physically different. They were, described as different, taller, Caucasoid. They were described as having psychic abilities, and we know that there were different kinds of great apes on this planet: Gigantopithecus, bonobos, chimpanzees, orangutans, gorillas. We don't know if something came here and fiddled with all of them, or something changed along the way, or there was some kind of a common ancestor to several of these different people. But I've already shown you there's the pygmies in Africa, the little people. That's it's not even just dwarfism. It's just that's their natural way. Same thing with the Negritos. And then there's dwarfs and midgets that come from genetic variation, and there's giants that come from pituitary issues, but there's also giants from different genetics. I've shown you that too with the FIFA patients. And there's, different races, and we don't even know if whatever this race of these giants were, if they really had hair or if they were wearing wigs. Because I know the pharaohs had to wear fake beards. So it appears that they had hair. It appears they were large. There's some hair on these pharaohs, mummies, pharaonic mummies, some of the not so old ones. But what was the case 15,000 years ago? I don't know. And every time we tend to find some of these strange giant bones, especially in the Americas or America, the Smithsonian, somehow gets their hands on it, or a fraternity, and it gets disappeared. So there's definitely a cover-up on that angle. And I know there'll be people, oh, there's no cover-up. Well, baloney, because you keep destroying them. You keep destroying whatever is found. So I will continue to dig on this subject. I just wanted to show how Hollywood keeps using this pharaonic archetype. And like I said, they were described as white. I've also talked about the cream of Saturn, that cream that the royals of England would put on their face, made of lead to make them snow white. But it would allegedly give them some problems down the road. But they were mimicking something. So like I said, as I continue to read, I will dig into this and see if I can find something. But definitely that archetype in Hollywood. And by the way, I used some pictures out on the internet or some screenshots. I'm claiming fair use. All the rest of the stuff is either my own photography or public domain or CC license out of Wikipedia. So I have to show you the comparison. So I do have to claim fair use on the Hollywood stuff. We'll see if YouTube dings me, but hopefully not. But yeah, definitely that archetype of the pharaoh comes through in all of these androgynous Caucasoid type giant or not giant or extraterrestrial being. That's it. Thank you.